Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, awesome. I am getting a few yeses in the chat. Just to introduce myself, my name is Janelle Marquez, and I am the manager of College Loops at Girls Who Code. Thank you so much for joining us at our GWC talks today on game development. I'm excited to kick off our panel by introducing you to our moderator, Emily Moss. Emily is the Senior Director of College and Career Programs at Girls Who Code. Emily believes the world will be a better place when more diverse voices are involved in designing, building, and leading the tech world, and loves seeing the incredible things Girls Who Code alumni have accomplished. When not working, she is also the dictator of her book club. Everyone, please welcome Emily Moss.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Janelle, for that introduction. I have to say, seeing everyone arriving in the chat, introducing themselves, we have folks coast to coast, studying everything, doing all kinds of jobs, computer information systems, cybersecurity, engineering, design and drama. Anna, that's fascinating. So I just want you to take a moment and take a look in the chat. You're going to see all of the folks you'll be interacting with this evening. It's me, it's our amazing panelists, my Girls Who Code colleagues, but it's also all of these other folks that are joining in to be part of this conversation tonight. And I hope that you take some hope and excitement and enthusiasm from that there are so many people here who want to be part of this conversation. We are delighted that you're spending some time this evening with us. We know that you're busy students. Some of you are on spring break. Some of you are still getting over midterms. So thank you. We're really honored that you're spending your time here with us. I'm delighted to bring on our panelists to introduce to you our really incredible speakers for tonight's conversation about the industry of game development. First, we have Diana Laura, who is a licensing production manager for Star Wars at Zynga. And those are probably two things you're familiar with, Star Wars and Zynga. Diana is a Bronx, New York City woman at heart, currently living in Texas. She works in gaming, is a performer. I'm reading her bio right now, and wow, it is like blowing me away. She produced her own video game TV show, started a podcast, quote unquote, before it was cool. I'm not going to ask you when that was, Diana, but you can tell us about it if you want. And has worked at companies like Sony, Deep Silver, Astro Gaming, and Ubisoft. And I asked Diana before this whether it was Ubisoft or Ubisoft, because it's okay to admit when you don't know something. And she pointed out it depends on what country you're in, which I loved. In her role, she manages the relationship between the Lucasfilm license and the game and marketing team. And we're going to talk a lot about what that all means. If that sounds like a whole bunch of what does she do all day long kind of gibberish, we're going to talk about that. And when she is not working, Diana likes to read, knit, and play video games. She loves going to the movies as well as cooking yummy meals. Before we move on to our second panelist, Diana, what are you reading these days?
What am I reading? What am I not reading? I actually took a break. In all sincerity, I just took a break from reading, and I'm back to reading my comic books. So I like to take like 6 months off and get everything like a backlog going, and then I just like kind of binge it all. So
I love it. Love graphic novels too. We can, if you have a favorite graphic novel, feel free to drop it in the chat. I bet Diana and I are taking all your recommendations. I just found out the Saga series is going to have new issues, so that's what.
It came back. It came back a few weeks ago.
It's amazing. Elf Quest. Oh, we've got recommendations going in the chat. Bring it, everybody.
Yeah.
Our second panelist tonight is Val Vacante. Hi, Val, who is the Director of Strategy, Product Innovation for Merkle, which is a Dentsu company. In her role, Val uncovers cultural trends, designs strategies, and next generation product innovations. We're going to talk about what all of that means, impacting the way that people connect and experience the world. Val has like 8 side hustles. She's the founder of Collabsco, where she pioneered the first ever connected play landscape. She's an award-winning digital product designer and has created experiences, across IoT. I think that's Internet of Things. Is that right, Val?
Yes.
IoT? Yes, AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, robotics, and beyond. Her portfolio features 50 brands, including ones you've probably heard of, like Hasbro and Mattel and Disney. And outside of work, you can find her anywhere creators are designing the future. I love that. Museums, accelerators, incubators, gaming events, pop-ups, arcades. You two sound like fun. Do you have fun? We're going to start with an icebreaker. I'm loving the chat already. Oh, I cut out. That's what happened there. Thank you, everybody. I'm back. We're going to start with an icebreaker to get this show rolling. And then we're going to dive into conversations about what their careers have looked like, how you could consider careers like theirs, though, of course, there's many versions out there. And the way we want to start is a childhood game that you enjoyed playing and why. And if we want to start with Val, and folks in the chat, feel free to answer yours.
Cool. So one of my most favorite games as a kid, actually taking it way back, was sitting in arcades or pizza joints with my dad and playing the likes of the Atari classics like Centipede and Pac-Man. But fast forward a bit, I would have to say I got my first console, which was an NES. So again, taking it way back, you guys, to the Super Mario Brothers days. And it was great because it was pre-multiplayer experience. So your multiplayer experience was your friend sat next to you in the room. And so we play together, learn the game together, die, replay, learn it, peruse the Nintendo magazine together. So those were one of my favorite. Super Mario, definitely one of my favorites.
I love it. And how about you, Diana?
So for me, my family and I, we moved from the Dominican Republic to the United States, and we didn't go anywhere, and we moved to Louisiana in the middle of nowhere. And so we really didn't socialize very much of anything. And so we had video games. And so my dad, so either my dad or my mom, I don't know which one, but most likely my dad brought an Atari like 7800 or something like that. And then that was how we played. And then once we got the Nintendo, like all bets were off. Like we were at the cutting edge of technology there. And so it was fantastic. And so my favorite game to play was The Legend of Zelda. And I played it with my mom. And so my mom would say, I'd come home from school and she'd go, you need to finish your homework. And of course I finished my homework, fantastic. And then once I was done with my homework, she was like, okay, let's play. And so we played The Legend of Zelda, and that was fantastic and awesome and a great memory.
I love it. And I don't know if you can tell, but the enthusiasm coming through in the chat, everyone has an answer to this question. I'll answer for myself. I think it was Natasha maybe earlier who said Sims. I was a Sims kid. I used to have to go to bed, and then everyone would go to sleep and I would sneak back downstairs because there was some milestone that was about to happen in my Sims game. Somebody was going to age up or get married or get a promotion at work. And I just man, it was so addictive, that feeling. I have to admit, during the height of the pandemic, I re-downloaded Sims, and it's still there.
Same.
I don't know if we have
any
other Sims folks. We do in the chat. Vanessa says Sims 4 has taken so much of my money. I understand that. So I want to start us here because this is you can see the enthusiasm, both from you two, the panelists, but also in the chat. People love games. They love playing games. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel creative, makes them feel connected. And I think one of the most exciting things to think about for our community at Girls Who Code is how you might take your love of games and turn it into a career. And we talk all the time at Girls Who Code. Oh, Minecraft. Excellent choice, Ariana. We talk at Girls Who Code all the time about how, when you think of computer science, you think, I have to be an engineer and I probably have to work at Google. That's the path, right? If I'm interested in tech or computer science, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's, by the way, an awesome path if that's the path that you go. But there's so many roles in the tech industry that you can have. And there's so many places to do that work. And I want to start by really understanding your job titles. So Diana, I want to start with you here. You're a licensing production manager for Star Wars at Zynga. Tell us what that means.
So, so it's kind of to rewind a little bit, how you said, not having like, not really having like your standard sort of engineering role. That was never me. So I like to say that my career has been kind of windy. I think folks think that in order to be in the gaming industry, like you said, you need to be like an engineer, or you need to code in some particular way. But I like to say that I'm kind of proof that's not true. I actually, my degree in college was I went to college for musical theater. So I like to say that I can sing, dance, and act at the same time, and I have a degree to prove it. Hey. And so I that's what I did for like the first couple of years of my life. Theater kid, yes. Because, and you know, what's funny is that theater kids, there are a lot of theater kids in the gaming industry. I think it's just because it's a creative, it's another creative outlet. It's artsy, as somebody said in the chat. It's a way to sort of transfer your skills. Obviously, I'm not, singing and dancing. I mean, debatable. If you know me in the office, I'm usually doing that in the hallways. But like, but when it comes to like the relationship building, when it comes to the interpersonal relationships, because when you're creating a show, when you're putting a show on Broadway or off Broadway, or in my case, you mentioned a video game TV show. It was like on public access in up in like New Rochelle, past the Bronx, New York. And so that's when you're putting together a show, you're all kind of working together, and you're working towards a common goal and putting it out there so that folks can enjoy. And that's really like the core thing of theater. And you're all coming together, and you're kind of like a family. And really that's the gaming industry, and it really translates. And I try to explain that to folks because I used to actually downplay that, when I first started in the industry, and then I realized, wait a minute, like all of the skills that I learned working in theater and performing in theater all translates to this. Now, that was a very long way of saying what my job is. My job is I take that I'm kind of like, if I want to use a theater term, I'm kind of like a sort of a stage manager of some sort. Let's use that, where in a very, very loose way, where I need to sort of, I work with everybody. I touch everything. So I need to work with engineers. I need to work with the artists. I need to work with producers, the executives, the vice president, like the high people as well, people who own, who run the company. So I need to work with everybody. I need to be able to sort of like, adjust how I talk to when I'm talking to an engineer, when I'm talking to an artist, when I'm talking to, a narrative designer. I also need to know, the stories, and I need to know the characters. And so I kind of interact with all that internally at Zynga, but then also to add an extra layer, I'm also interacting with the people at Lucasfilm for Star Wars. So I'm interacting with all of those same exact folks at Lucasfilm, and then also like taking like their feedback and any sort of questions that they may have about the production, about the show not the show, back in theater terms, in the game that we're making, and bringing that back to make sure that like we're honoring the Star Wars property, and then also giving the studio the power and the creative agency to be creative and to be awesome and to make awesome games. So that was a very long-winded way of saying what my job is, but I like to say that I'm the glue that connects everybody together, and a cheerleader.
I love that. And I love a few things about it. You know, people think of working in tech sometimes as really isolating, like, oh, I just sit at my computer and I code all day, right? And in fact, depending on your role, it might be really collaborative. It might rely
Mhm.
on communication, might be really creative. You know, it's not necessarily just you in a dark room coding, unless
No, it's
that's something
problem
you're into.
solving.
Yeah,
It's
it's
also
problem
problem
solving.
solving. It's
Yes.
also being, understanding kindness. I think people, there are too many hard skills that people think about when they think about going into the gaming industry, and even in jobs in general, and soft skills like thinking about, collaboration and kindness and understanding and patience. These are all things.
Working with all different kinds of people, right?
Exactly.
Thank you. I'm excited to learn more as we go on today. Val, okay. Similarly, you have this title, Director of Strategy, Product Innovation for Merkle, a Dentsu company. I don't know how any of this fits on a business card, but tell us what that means.
Well, the good news is we don't really have business cards anymore, right? So LinkedIn and Twitter give you the character limit, right? But yeah, basically my role at Merkle is really kind of uncovering cultural trends, working with teams similar to Diana, all cross-functional teams, right? So it's like designers, engineers, even subject matter experts as well in different areas. And so wearing multiple hats as well, but really in addition to kind of uncovering those cultural trends, it's also creating new products and services for our company, but also teaming up with our clients to help them uncover those opportunities, as well as early prototypes on new products that they might come up with. And I'm really fortunate that I've worked with such great brands like Hasbro and Mattel, where play and mixing and merging not only physical toys and games, but also, now that we're living in a connected world, connected experiences. So how does this physical toy engage, whether it's an app play experience, whether it's a gamified experience? I think everybody heard all about the Travis Scott Fortnite event that happened during the pandemic. Well, what was really cool about that is, you had brands like Hasbro who are launching a physical product at the same time that this event was happening in Fortnite, and launched all on the same day. And that involved a ton of different people, right? So that's everybody from like a industrial designer who's making that Nerf blaster, to the manufacturer, to, oh, by the way, the folks over at Epic, right, launching that experience as well, and coordinating, all of the different bits and pieces. And then in terms of how I started my career, so I've always been a nerd, a digital techie, whatever person at heart. Look, I told y'all back when I was a little kid playing Pac-Man and Centipede, but my career didn't take me straight to gaming. So just like Diana's, it's like I didn't start in gaming. My first role out of university, it was at an agency in London, an advertising agency. And at the time, you had sort of traditional advertising. You had like TV, and blast all these sort of ads everywhere. And then there was like this relatively new thing called digital. And I applied for 2 roles there, and I was, called to come in. They wanted to make me an offer. And this was in London. I hop on the 28 bus. I get down there, and I'm wearing like one of my 3 sort of nice suits that I bought myself. Went down there looking all nice, and then and this lady, she was sort of like wincing and making all these faces and all these emotions. I'm like, did I get the job? I mean, y'all called me down here. And so she's like, well, everybody loved you and they thought you're great, but, and I'm like, oh my gosh, say it. She's like, we only have the digital opportunity, and I was like, oh, that's cool. That's the future. Like, that's completely cool.
Nice.
Yeah. And so it was great in that I was able to actually, the team were really open because we were creating things that hadn't been done before, whether it was new technologies, content management systems, how people interact with physical and digital products. And so I had a lot of autonomy, and I was able to work with cross-functional teams and learn from them. So I was really thankful for the experience. And it's
I love that you use the word windy, Diana, to describe your career. And now, Val, you're telling the story where it like took a hard left, where the job you thought was going to be available maybe wasn't. And those kinds of things happen. It's not a straight line, right? Especially when you work on the cutting edge in technology and gaming and creative fields. There's always new stuff to learn. And I actually wanted to ask, you both work kind of adjacent to the technical work. You talked about working with engineers, communicating with technical folks. You know, Val, you talked about working in Internet of Things and AR and VR. When you have to learn a new technology, like let's say you're starting on a project that you're not really familiar and you've got to learn how to speak the language, learn the basics, like how do you approach that? Maybe we can start with you on this one, Val.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of any new technology that's out there, you know, I really just try and educate myself on it because it's new, right? So like people don't always know how to talk about it. I think about way back in the day when the internet became popular. It was like people didn't know how to talk about it. They called it the World Wide Web. They called it the information superhighway. Like, how many words is that to say? I mean, now it's just the internet, right? You just, or go online. And so at that time, like we were learning how to talk about it. And even with mobile phones, when those became common, you know, people would say, oh, do you have a cellular phone? Like no one talks like that anymore. So I think it's basically, you know, for me, it's learning about it. I also write as well. And so I'm always looking at like, how are people talking about things? And then when I'm writing and researching and talking about these new things as they come out, I always want to make it as easy for people to understand as possible when I'm communicating out. So I try and absorb how others are talking about it and distill it down into, I like to, just regular people language, you know? And yeah, so that's my take.
I love it. How about you, Diana, when you encounter some new technology and you have to learn the ropes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm whenever, and this has always been a constant for me. It was like, always have a natural sort of curiosity towards things. And so I, much like Val, I kind of do the research. I research about it. I read about it. I also ask around, like, hey, what do you know about this? And then occasionally check out a couple of YouTube videos if anything exists about it. So I read a lot. And then also depending on the form of technology, I'll either like purchase it or like or ask somebody, hey, can I come over to your place and use it? Like in the a VR, for example, like when it was first coming out for a home, and I was sort of debating it. I had a friend who was programming for it, and I was like, hey, can I just swing by and just like check out your Oculus or whatever, like what can I just check that out? So I just, you know, I would do that as well. So I really make the effort to educate myself and just learn it. And then sometimes I just jump in. Like, for example, when I worked at Ubisoft, I was using, they have a proprietary platform that they use called Snowdrop. And so that's not available anywhere unless you work at Ubisoft. And so I was like, oh, okay, so this is pretty cool. And kind of unique. Let me try it out. And it was, and so, you know, so like I would take like my lunch times and a couple of hours, you know, throughout the week, and I jump in and I try things out. And I even like, I even went to like the audio team, and I was like, hey, I heard y'all needed help. I have some free time. what can I do? And they were like, oh, we need somebody to add steps in the game. And I was like, sign me up. I will be the step person 100%. And so that's what I did. And so the steps that you hear in the game, that was me. I did that. so it's really neat. And so that's what I did. And that's what I normally do is I just jump in and learn.
I love it. And I love that you mentioned like YouTube videos and Googling and reading. People think that engineers like somehow memorize everything.
Oh, no.
No. Everybody is Googling. Everybody is watching YouTube videos. Everybody's looking it up on Stack Overflow, right? And I don't know if you can see in the chat, I asked folks what they're learning, and everybody is teaching themselves something right now. We have folks learning Python. We have PowerShell. Somebody else said, what is PowerShell? I love that. We're all learning new stuff. I'm learning React. I'm making a visual novel game using Python. Oh my God, Kayla, that sounds amazing. That's so cool. Free Code Camp is an amazing resource. There's so many of these. So I just want to thank everybody who's been sharing resources in the chat. I want to talk about the industry a little bit. Game development is a huge umbrella. And I would love to know about like, what are the trends that you see in the field? So most of the folks listening in, not everybody is in college or recently graduating. And if they're thinking about like, where is this going? What roles and fields might I consider? I would love to know as an insider what you think the options are. And if you could also talk about some of the big buckets of types of work, right? Like engineering is a bucket, design is a bucket, product marketing and licensing, and I don't even know what all the other buckets are. Diana, I'm just ping-ponging back and forth here. Tell us about your thoughts on the industry at the moment.
I think we're at a very exciting moment in the industry. I actually just did a licensing Twitter Spaces last week. Time has no meaning. I don't remember. Yes, yes, it was last week. Where we talked about the future of licensing and partnerships, and how companies in some cases these like I use my example, like in my case like Zynga, Star Wars, Lucasfilm / Disney / Marvel / those guys, and how these particular companies are starting to sort of branch out into not just being a part of gaming, and not just doing movies either, but also getting into gaming, and not just also doing gaming, but also how that kind of connects into like somebody mentioned gummy bears, like they're like licensing gummy bears, like
sorry, what?
based on, okay. Yeah, I know, right? So like with the character faces, so things like that, like so you see that everywhere. But now you're starting to see these like major video game companies starting to move into that. So like Ubisoft, as an example, is starting to like moved into TV film, even though they've had movies, even though they've done they've licensed things out. Now they actively are like, wait a minute, we don't have to give it to anybody else to take. Like I'm not giving my property or my IP to you. Now we can actually do all the work. We have a humongous amount of talent in our studio. We could take a narrative designer from this game and they could write a movie, So it's like, so these are the sort of ways that the industry is expanding, in that like it's not just about making video games anymore. It's sort of making video games into, it is an industry, but more like, because when you think of like when you think of like the gaming industry, at least some folks still think of it as a young industry, and it's not as mature as like movies and TV. And so now like these video game companies are starting to expand and really try to mature the industry, and that stuff is really, really exciting, which means that opens up those buckets to not just being an engineer. Now they're going to need obviously legal, but not just like legal for gaming. They're going to need legal for shoes, and legal for food, legal for movies, or just lots of different. I just muted myself. Lots of different types of people who aren't just engineers as well.
Thank you. It's like such an exciting time and it's a growing
Yes.
space, right?
Mhm.
Val, what have you noticed about trends in the industry, the skills and roles that are available? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I loved what Deanna said about that because I mean, in short, I would say gaming is the new Hollywood, right? So like, over time it was all about going to the movies, watching your favorite TV show, but it is completely flipped. Gaming is influencing culture. Gaming is influencing IP, right? So intellectual properties and licensing. So that's why there's all of these incredible opportunities out there. And what it means is, if you're a game designer, if you're a writer, because narrative is really important in terms of like, what is that story that happens in the gameplay? So if you're a really great writer, that's an ideal opportunity to look at, hey, maybe it's becoming a narrative writer in a game. The other thing is in terms of design as well. There is game design, but then we're seeing more things like these virtual events. And also with gaming influencing culture, it's also influencing, I touched on toys a moment ago, like those physical toy plays. So that means, hey, we need toy designers to shape those experiences. But also events as well, right? So I know like the world's opening up. We just had South by Southwest here in Austin for the first time since 2019. GDC, right, is happening right now, right? The big game developers conference out in San Francisco is happening right now. And so all of the sort of gaming communities there, there was an incredible event prior to COVID called Game XP down in Brazil. And it actually it has the world's largest esports screen, by the way, if they ever bring it back. Amazing.
How big are we talking?
I don't have the measurements of it, but it is massive and like it is a true claim that it is the biggest. But with an event like that, bringing like Fortnite into the real world, they had like a whole drop thing. They had Crash Bandicoot and they had people on scooters, right? So extending that IP into those physical play experiences. And then I think the other wave of it too to consider is as new technologies become more accessible, right? So when you think about web AR, for example, so augmented reality, it's all been kind of app-based for a while. Folks have been experimenting with augmented reality glasses, but I think where we're going to see a big experience shift are folks experimenting with web AR experiences. So there's a company called The Eighth Wall. They were just acquired by Niantic, who are the creators of Pokemon Go. And they have a great platform. So for those of you who know just a little bit of Unity right now, who are kind of experimenting with Unity, you can go on Niantic and experiment with Lightship. If you want to look at kind of creating make the world your gamified experience and experiment with that. That's one of the big things I really encourage folks to do. Or some of these tips and tools are completely free and accessible. So really get out there and experiment. I myself, I'm not a trained engineer. I am not a trained coder. We were actually having a chat before the session today. And sometimes for me, when I'm trying to communicate an idea, I might just experiment with different technologies to create a light prototype so that I can demonstrate, with a designer, with an engineer in order to realize that idea. So again, kind of flipping it, gaming is the new Hollywood, and it's really, the possibilities are endless.
I love that. We're getting some questions about, like, let's say you have an idea for a game, like a story or an arc that you want to experiment with. And, you mentioned Unity. There's so many technologies out there. Have either of you seen anything creative about how someone can start building a little prototype or making a little game, or what tools or software maybe folks are talking about in that space. Any ideas for people who just want to kind of mess around and get creative? Whoever wants to take this one first, go for it.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of there are a lot of tools out there. I mean, I think didn't somebody mention Twine? You know, like they were creating a story, a visual novel or something like that, which I think is, there are a lot of those it really, I always tell people that you can always say, I want to make a game. Everybody wants to make a game. Everybody's got an idea to make a game. It doesn't matter. My mom has an idea to make a game. Everybody does. But like, the key is actually doing it. And so, and actually making that effort. I know that sounds very, very silly to say, but it's easier said than done, but it's really literally just like, there are so many programs and tools and things that you can do to just make, like, you can make your own simple game and create, you know, a particular mechanic that is super interesting, that then you could, you know, bring to you know, a Discord that, you know, that you're in, where you're talking and you're like, hey, I have this really great mechanic with where there are other people, and they're like, oh, let's make something else. And then, but the first step is actually like taking that step, because everybody can talk about it, but once you finally move in there, move in and start actively, like, you know, doing it, then that's honestly the first step. And frankly, it really is the hardest step. And once you just start, you find that you can't stop. It just, everything sort of tumbles forward, and that's what I found.
I'll add one piece before I turn it to Val, which is just find some friends to do this with, because doing this as a group is so much more fun. And when you get really frustrated, you have people to troubleshoot with. But Val, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was also just going to say it is getting started, and it doesn't have to be super complex. I think the main thing is just to communicate your idea. It can be even with paper, for example, you know, so if you just wanted to get some sketches together with paper, or, you know, just use Google Slides and try and, you know, even if it's like a mood board or some GIFs to communicate the idea, or even things, you know, when I know I was talking about augmented reality and Lightship and maybe knowing Unity, even taking it a step back and experimenting with like Snapchat lenses, for example, and just getting in there and having a play. And I think too, from a game design perspective, you know, we talked about obviously video games, mobile games, augmented reality, VR, but there's also connected experiences as well. There have been a number of companies who've worked with smart speakers, for example. So there's things like Alexa that you can experiment with physical digital play, with board game play. So hey, if you're a board game fan and and you have a friend who's like a super into music or into sound, I mean, you guys get together and do some experimenting.
I love that. And Val, I really love your focus on play as like a worthwhile pursuit. Like that is how you experiment with things. That's how you learn. That's what keeps it fun. I just really love that approach. I have one last question, and then we'll take a few from the group, the audience. So audience folks, feel free to drop questions. You can put them in the chat, or you can drop them in the Q&A. I see a couple already in the Q&A that I'll try to get to. My last question for you two is about a little more practical. You're trying to get an internship or a job. Let's say you're trying to do it in this field. You're picking your classes, you're looking for summer internships, maybe you're teaching yourself some things on the side. What practical advice do you have to really prepare yourself to apply for jobs as an early career person in this space? Diana, why don't you take it away to start?
Can you repeat the question one more time, just so that I don't, because there's two different ways that you can interpret that.
Practical advice for getting ready to apply for jobs in this field. Maybe that's classes to take, types of internships to look for, skills to build.
Well, I mean, it really, that's actually a very hard question, simply because it really depends on what sort of career path you want to take. I mean, for me, I can only use myself as an example. I like to think that every class that I took in college in some way, that obviously, except for that, because I took volleyball like as a passive class. So I was like, oh, I've got an extra credit. Let me just take volleyball just for fun. So maybe the volleyball may not count, but like everything else that I've taken feeds into like my experiences. I think that when you have a specific sort of skill set that you're trying to go into, if you're trying to do like tech art or art, there are those particular courses. I always tell people that the best way to go forward when you're in college and / in high school is to really find your group. Like I mentioned earlier, find discords. There are a lot of like groups like this that have networking possibilities where you can connect with other people who can help you connect or guide you in the direction that you need to go, that you would like to go. And I think that in your early days of your career, I think the most important thing really is just soaking in as much information as you can, really doing things that you're, in your free time, in your spare time, learning. If for whatever reason you're not, the courses at your school or don't offer Unity as an example, then like, okay, that Unity is important for game development, then do that on your spare time. There are a lot of resources right now where you can actively learn. Me growing up, I didn't have any of that, so I pretty much had to learn on the job. But now I'm just amazed at the amount of information and research. Not research. What's the word? The amount of things,
tips, advice,
content networkings that's out there right now. So that's not what free content. Yes, thank you.
I love it. Thanks, Jolene. I do think that's great advice. Val, what do you think? Sort of practical, getting ready for careers type advice.
Yeah, I think that it's really important. And I say this from experience, you can have a lot of anxiety, like, oh my gosh, is this the thing I'm going to do for the rest of my life? No. But find out what what you've studied, what you have interest in, and really think about the companies you want to work for. Like, do you want to work for a big company? Do you want to work for a small company? And really look at the type of companies and culture you want to work for. Look at the job descriptions that they have, see what are the kind of roles that you might be interested in. So maybe it's not a right out of college role, but hey, if it's something with, the first step, and then that'll give you a sense of maybe the type of classes or the type of activities to do. And I think there's a ton of value in building your own portfolio. So whether that is doing something on the side for a company, an internship, but even if an internship isn't available, if there's something that you have a point of view, a prototype or an interest, build it, make it, include that in your portfolio, use that in your interview when you have that. I just can't, like it. As Deanna said, there's so many tools out there that you can empower yourself and your creativity with. And I think it's also being yourself too is really important. So whether it's building your portfolio, your resume, and then the last thing I'd like to add to the group here is really network. I mean, again, LinkedIn, free tool out there. Find people who might inspire you. I mean, a lot of people are happy to talk with people coming out of university, who have an interest. They may not have a job for you off the spot, like when you reach out to them, but they may have advice, or they may be able to connect you with someone, or they may have a friend. And so while you personally may not have a big network, just start building it. And there's a ton of people out there who are happy to help where they can.
I suspect both of you are going to get a lot of LinkedIn requests later today. I also want to thank the folks in the chat, who have been sharing some other ideas about how to stay up on the business. I think setting Google News alerts for topics that you're interested in can be really great. There's a list somebody shared here about TikTokers to follow or Instagram accounts to follow. Twitter is super important in the tech industry as well. But really, you can just start reading, and you'll start to figure it out. I appreciate, Jolene, your LinkedIn is important. I just want to say that. We also have a Discord server. Janelle shared that if you scroll up. We have a Girls Who Code Discord server. And this conversation you've been having in the chat where you're saying, hey, I'm curious about resources for this. Is anybody else learning Python? That's what's happening on our Discord. So please join. If you're going to a cool event, like another virtual panel, invite everybody, say who wants to come to this with me, or say, hey, I found this awesome person to follow on Twitter. You all should follow them as well. Really share your resources with this community and people will share back with you. I want to take a couple of the really great questions people have asked. This one is, well, we've gotten this in a couple of ways. It's sort of a question that Caitlin asked. Somebody else asked it in the Q&A. It's about balancing work and life, and specifically around personal projects and interests, and maybe growing those things, and your 9 to 5, where you get a paycheck and health insurance, I hope. So Val, why don't you start with this? How do you think about that balance?
So, I will say it is a challenge. It is a challenge. If you're working, and I think particularly when you're working in something you enjoy, and again, it's me personally, I've had challenges with this because when I'm enjoying my work and I'm solving a particular problem, working through a creative idea, I get immersed in it. I want to keep going. For me, running is really important, and just general fitness. So the volleyball is okay. But fitness is important. Spending time with my family is important. And so a good gauge is if I'm not running as much as I was, or if I'm not doing the regular activities, then I know I need to check myself. I know okay, I have this stint where it's going to be intense, whether we have a big launch or something coming up, but then after that, and I try and manage that with my family as well. Look, we have this big event, this launch, and then after that, we need to work. I always say get back to regular. So that is, running, that is spending the time. But when you do what you love, it can be a challenge.
I love naming that, and finding what your regular is, and that's going to look different for everybody, is so important. How about you, Diana?
Well, for me, I have in the last couple of months have been very, very transparent about my burnout. Because I experienced burnout. I worked, I worked in game development, obviously, and so game development was it has depending on the studio, a terrible work-life balance. To be frank, that's just that's how it is. But thank goodness things are changing. And I think what Val said earlier about when you're looking at companies and you're looking at where you want to work, it's important that the companies that you work at provide that important work-life balance. Otherwise, you become burnt out like I did. And so for me, because I think one of the things that we need to as women, we need to constantly remind ourselves is that because we have to work a lot harder. We have to work harder. We have to prove ourselves a lot more. And so I found myself just working too many hours. I found myself putting a lot of pressure on myself. I found myself taking work that didn't, taking work that frankly wasn't my job, and because I was not because I wasn't feeling like I was being treated equally. I felt like I needed to work extra, and that significantly burnt me out, and I crashed. and I needed to take a break. And so I would be lying to you. I would be lying to you if I said, oh yeah, I just, I go running, because I literally could not get up, get off my couch, because that's how tired I was. My brain could not put that together. And I'm giving you all this information because I think it's important that we talk about burnout in this industry. And we also talk that we're also honest with ourselves. Yes, you're so right, Caitlin. It takes such a long time to recover from. I'm just recovering from it. When you asked me, Emily, what book I was reading earlier, I didn't pick up a book for about 5 years, and because I could not read. So I just finished reading a book a couple months ago, and now I'm back in my comics and all this other really, really great things. But what I've started to do is punch out. So I punch out at a specific time every day, and I say, I'm done. And then, I have a laptop for work, and then I have my own PC, and I shut down my laptop, and then I hop on and I, play Final Fantasy, or I go and play something else, or I get up and I go for a walk. I have my dogs that I love very much, and I go take them out for a walk. I've started gardening. So I find like it's necessary that we need to have that it's important that we advocate for ourselves for that work-life balance. Val, you're nodding your head. I feel like you need to say something. Go for it. Say it.
I'm like, woo, amen. Yes, to everything. because I've definitely been there in a couple of stints throughout my career. I've definitely been there. One time happened, my son was really young, and I was working a ton of hours. I was traveling a lot. And he just happened to be jumping on the bed, and he actually gave me a concussion. The kid's got a hard head, but he actually gave me a concussion. It knocked me out for about 6 weeks, where I was but I was conscious, but I had to take work off for 6 weeks. And the doctor told me, he's like, you're going to have to put your type A personality on the back burner. So I like to, I'm like a bee now, and yes. But I got to that point, and then sure enough, it creeped back up again. I was in a very executive role. I was the only woman who had ever been in that kind of role. Definitely the only mom who had ever been in that kind of role. So as you were talking about that responsibility, or feeling like you're having to do more, to prove your worth, to prove I can do it too. I've definitely been there. And I think it is really important, that, hey, I think we hold ourselves accountable, but we also are vocal in that, and we set those boundaries, and it's here's, like you say, you punch out and you go play Final Fantasy. I mean, mine's I got my Oculus in there, but
I need to get one.
But it is, and now kind of that's where I am now. Is I know when I need to get back to my regular, and I am vocal. I will say at Dentsu and Merkle, our teams there, they appreciate that and they value that. And I also encourage everybody else to, hey, raise your hand if you can't take on something else, or communicate, hey, I've got this, this is when I will. And being vocal and being your own advocate, I think is super critical.
Finding a place where you feel safe enough to be hey, you need to find that positive place where that you can go to your teammates and you can go, hey, I don't feel very good. I woke up with a headache, or hey, I have cramps today. And they're killing me. So I'm going to go take a nap. And so they'll be like, yeah, sure. Go for it. So that's the sort of positive environment that we need to bring, which I think comes with those soft skills.
It does come with the soft skills, and it also comes, I think, with more diverse people working in these spaces and being able to share themselves. And I'm going to end us on a positive note because it got a little heavy. And I say that in a good way, like sharing some of the vulnerabilities and the coping, and also the times when the coping doesn't really work. That happens sometimes. So I want to end on a very fun question. This is from Vanessa. She asked, what's a moment from a video game that has always stuck with you? And that's going to be our last little quick question for the group. Then just for the audience, we're going to share some upcoming Girls Who Code events and programs. And then we're going to wrap because we respect all of y'all's time, and it's a late evening. So a video game moment that has always stuck with you. Whoever's got one, drop it.
I've got one. Okay, I'm gonna take it all the way back to Pac-Man. Like when they go in the middle, you know, and they kiss. Like I love that.
Mine is an MMO, Final Fantasy 14. So there were two Final Fantasy 14s. There was the first one, and then they relaunched it again because the first one was not as successful. But the really neat thing that they did was in the first one, they made it so that like for like a couple of months, there was like this like meteor that was just like over here somewhere. And then it got closer and closer and closer. And it would be like the impending end of the world. And so everybody signed on, and we sat there as this like meteor came and sat there. And it came and like destroyed the world. And then a cutscene showed up that was like amazing. And then it started the next one. That was one of the best game moments of my life. I thought that was fantastic.
These are amazing. And Vanessa answered her own question, which I love too, about seeing herself represented in a game. I mean, these are amazing. We're going to wrap because time is valuable. Val, Diana, I feel energized. I hope our audience does as well. For the folks in the chat, there's so many amazing resources here, and I hope you were taking notes, but we're going to send you an email tomorrow with lots of them. And we are going to also invite you to join the Discord, where this kind of conversation happens all the time. There's a mental health channel in our Discord where folks talk about things like imposter syndrome and burnout and wellness. We also talk about fun things like games and TV and podcasts. And we talk about coding and practicing technical interviews and resources for continuing to learn. So we really hope that you will join us on the Discord and for future events. If we could just one last time, thank you so much, Val and Diana. This was really, really amazing. Thank you for your time and for your honesty with this group tonight. Well, everyone loves you in the chat. I see it coming.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to turn it over to Janelle to share a few things coming up with Girls Who Code.
All right. Hey, can you hear me? Okay, wonderful. I just want to take this time to thank you, Emily, so much. Thank you to the panelists. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much for joining us this weekend. I am excited to share some opportunities with all of y'all. First up, our work prep program is back. So Work Prep is a career exploration program designed to introduce college-age students to multiple career pathways and kind of give a peek behind the scenes look at work practices and company culture at places, for example, like JP Morgan Chase and Accenture. Just, you know, some benefits: by completing the program, students typically walk away with a better understanding of how to move forward in their careers, the opportunity to apply for internships or future entry-level positions, and even a stipend ranging from $350 to $450, depending on the program length. Heads up, applications are due Sunday, April 17th. And for more information on program dates and eligibility, just make sure to scan the QR code. And we'll also include that link in a follow-up email. Lastly, I would love to hear from you all about this event. We're always wanting to improve our experience and your experience in attending our talks. So please complete our survey. Super quick, super easy. And we'd love to hear from you all. Thank you all so much once again for attending tonight's GWC talks. Have a wonderful rest of your night.